Aaliyah Brooks was 42 years old. She possessed warm brown eyes that had become skilled at concealing a profound pain, and a figure that didn't quite measure up to the harshly restrictive standards of the East Coast elite into which her family name had propelled her. As a black woman hailing from a family with old money, she was a remarkable presence, distinguished not by her wealth, but by her understated elegance and the way she looked at people, as if she believed everyone had a worthwhile story to tell. However, behind her back, the very same people who lauded her charitable contributions derisively called her the Fat Aries. Her husband, Darius Coleman, was among those individuals. That morning the Atlanta mansion exuded the fragrant aromas of fresh jasmine and gourmet coffee. It was Darius's birthday. The private chef had prepared a lavish brunch, and Aaliyah had personally arranged for fresh flowers to adorn the living room. She had meticulously selected a high-end Rolex watch, knowing he coveted it, not for its time-telling capabilities, but for the designer name that would gleam on his wrist in campaign photos. Darius, 7 years her junior, was an aspiring politician, charismatic in public, but cold and calculating in private. His gaze was akin to that of a hunter, perpetually strategizing his next move. They had been married for a decade. No children, no scandals, and certainly no love. Sometimes Aaliyah pondered whether the love had ever been genuine, or if she had simply imagined it, like dreaming of a beachfront property that never materializes. At precisely 10:16 a.m., she descended the grand staircase, holding an envelope. It contained a certificate for a $100,000 donation in Darius's name to a National Children's Foundation. She believed it would bring a smile to his face. He delighted in appearing generous. Even more, he relished seeing his public image enhanced on social media. The dining room was deserted, but she detected voices emanating from the adjacent parlor. She paused instinctively and stood motionless behind the slightly ajar door. And then she overheard it. "That fat cow disgusts me, Mom," Darius said, laughing. "I only care about her money. What did you think, that I actually enjoyed sleeping with her?" Aaliyah held her breath. Monica Coleman, her mother-in-law, showed no sign of surprise. Her voice responded as if confirming something self-evident. "At least pretend, Darius. Do it until you inherit everything that's hers. After that, you know what you have to do. That woman's days in your life are numbered. Do you want to be tied to a body that looks like an inflated bag? A piñata stuffed with regrets?" They laughed with the unburdened ease of people who felt no remorse about their cruelty. Aaliyah swallowed hard. The envelope slipped from her grasp without making a sound. Her facial expression remained unchanged, but her legs trembled subtly, as if the world had suddenly accelerated. She maintained her composure. She slowly retreated, ascending the stairs without her heels making a sound, and quietly closed the door to her bedroom as if nothing untoward had occurred. She didn't weep, her tears burned too deep to fall. She didn't scream. Her silence was sharper than any blade. And she didn't confront them, not yet. That evening they dined together. Aaliyah offered a cheerful smile and presented him with his gift. Darius thanked her with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek and feigned enthusiasm. Monica commented that the wine was excellent and suggested Aaliyah consider trying a friend's diet. Everyone laughed except Aaliyah. She simply observed them both with a serenity that was less about genuine calm and more about calculated planning. Past midnight, Darius was sound asleep in the master suite, while Aaliyah walked barefoot through the house. She scrutinized every corner. The artwork she had personally selected, the furniture she had imported from Italy, the grand piano she had never learned to play. Every object stood as a silent witness to a life that had never truly been hers. It was a museum meticulously constructed to fit a mold that had been suffocating her for years. In the study, she retrieved a sheet of paper and wrote in a steady hand, "Thanks for showing your true colors." She signed it without a name. She folded the note, then opened her laptop. In less than an hour, she contacted a discreet real estate broker and a foreign buyer, and transferred the bulk of her fortune to a new account in Switzerland under a different identity. Having spent years managing her family's wealth, she was intimately familiar with how to move money without leaving a trace. By 5 a.m., the mansion was behind her. No servants witnessed her departure. She carried only a backpack, a long coat, her passport, and a photograph of herself at 18, when she dreamed of traveling the world before the sterling name transformed her into a trophy wife. 2 hours later, Darius woke up. He called out for his wife, puzzled by her absence. He checked the kitchen, the garden, the bathrooms. He found her only in the form of a piece of paper on the pillow. "Thanks for showing your true colors." He crumpled the note, failing to comprehend its meaning. He didn't even suspect she had overheard the conversation. He assumed it was a tantrum, a senseless impulse, emotional drivel. He called her cell phone. It was off. He sent text messages. No reply. He called his mother. "Where is Aaliyah? Why are you asking me?" She left. She just left a note. "Thanks for showing your true colors." What the hell does that mean? Monica felt a shiver run down her spine for the first time. That same day, Darius discovered the house had been sold. The buyer had wired the money directly to the Swiss account. He had no access. Legally, everything belonged to Aaliyah, even his tailored suits. What Darius was unaware of was that the media was about to explode. The bank involved in the transfer had inadvertently leaked a statement to a finance reporter who had been investigating Darius for corruption. It was only a matter of days before the scandal would hit national television. Aaliyah, meanwhile, was riding a city bus heading to the East Detroit neighborhood of Detroit, a place where nobody would recognize her. She gazed out the window, her eyes calm, and her mouth set in a determined line. She carried her old photo in the inside pocket of her coat like a cherished amulet, and for the first time in years she breathed freely. She had no fixed plan or destination, only a singular purpose. To start over from a place where she was worth nothing, to discover how much she was truly worth. On the evening news, the anchor announced, "The wife of rising political figure Darius Coleman has disappeared. There are rumors she sold their mansion and emptied her accounts. Some speculate kidnapping, others claim it's a marital scandal. Nobody knew for sure, but she did." She realized the true abduction wasn't her vanishing. It was the theft of her own freedom, stolen one obedient smile at a time. She knew that contempt disguised as marriage would no longer have a place in her existence. And she also knew that soon the world would meet a woman who had been labeled a lucky fat girl, but who was now determined to prove there is nothing more powerful than a woman who no longer needs anyone else to lift herself up. No one imagined that behind that silent smile lay a truth larger than any betrayal. Aaliyah Brooks hadn't escaped. She had risen, from ashes, from betrayal, from the woman they once owned. Aaliyah Brooks had been reborn. The bus advanced slowly through dusty streets, the windows fogged with the damp morning air. Her backpack rested on her lap. Inside, there were no jewels, no designer clothes, no expensive perfumes, only documents, some cash, a notebook filled with phrases she wrote when her chest couldn't contain the tears, and that faded photograph of her youth, her standing by the ocean with her arms open as if the whole world belonged to her. Back then she hadn't yet met Darius. Back then, she hadn't yet become the elegant shadow of a fraudulent life. The bus stopped with a screech. The driver turned his head without interest and said in a rough voice, "East Detroit, last stop." Aaliyah stood up. No one looked at her. No one recognized the woman who just 2 days prior graced the covers of fashion magazines and charity event spreads. In this world she was invisible, and for the first time it gave her a sense of relief. The East Detroit wasn't a poor neighborhood. It was a wounded one. The cracked facades seemed to tell stories of harsh winters, broken promises, and hopes that survived like weeds between the stones. Children played barefoot in puddles of dirty water. Women swept sidewalks while carrying babies on their hips. A man sold barbecue ribs from a food truck on the corner. An old radio spilled out timeless, soulful R&B. Aaliyah walked the streets, observing every detail with a mix of fear and fascination. A taped-up notice on a house gate caught her attention. Room for rent, shared bath, no questions asked. She knocked on the door. A woman in her 60s with weathered skin and small, distrustful eyes came out. "Looking for something?" "I saw the sign." I'm looking for a place to stay for a while. I can pay up front. The woman scanned her from head to toe. Something about her didn't fit. Too much poise. Skin too well cared for in this environment. Name? Aaliyah hesitated for only a fraction of a second. Tasha Reed. That's an odd name. Come in. The room's free, but I don't give refunds and I don't like trouble. You won't have any. The room was small with a twin bed, a fan that sounded like it was about to fall from the ceiling, and a window without a proper pane. The walls were stained with dampness. It smelled of confinement, but to her, it felt like a sanctuary. She paid for a month and settled in. That night she didn't cry. She just lay on the hard mattress, closed her eyes, and let the silence do its work. The next day, she walked aimlessly through the neighborhood. She introduced herself as a woman ruined by financial fraud, someone who had lost everything. It wasn't a lie, though not for the reasons everyone imagined. They looked at her with pity, but also with a certain morbid curiosity. She was new. She was strange. She was another sad story in a place full of them. She arrived at a small community health center. The facade was peeling. Inside, there were a couple of rusty exam tables, broken plastic chairs, and a makeshift reception desk made of cardboard boxes. A woman was arguing with a young man about medicine they couldn't afford. "Ma'am, I already told you we don't have that antibiotic, and if you get it outside, I can't guarantee it's authentic." The masculine voice belonged to a tall man with disheveled brown hair. His shirt sleeves rolled up, and dark circles under his eyes that revealed sleepless nights. His eyes were marked by sadness, but his tone was firm yet warm. Aaliyah watched him for a few seconds. He glanced at her fleetingly, then refocused on the patient. "Tell your son to keep coming. Even if you don't have the money, we don't deny care here. We'll find the medicine somehow." When they finished, Aaliyah approached. "Are you the doctor?" "I'm Dr. Jamal Hayes. Do you need medical attention?" "No, I came to volunteer. I have experience in organization management. Maybe I can help with inventory, coordinating donations, things like that." Jamal observed her in silence. There was something about the way she spoke that conveyed a certainty that didn't quite align with her story of losing everything. He didn't confront her. He extended his hand. "Welcome, Tasha. This place needs more hands than questions." And so it began. In the following days, Aaliyah learned to fold stain sheets, organize boxes of expired supplies, and receive minimal donations that arrived like miracles. No one asked about her past. All that mattered was what she did in the present. It was in that same clinic that she met Imani. She was 8 years old, with dull hair and big dark eyes that looked as if they knew too much. She sat on the exam table, her head resting on the shoulder of a sweet-faced elder. "Miss Thelma, she hasn't wanted to eat for 3 days. The woman said she has a fever at night, and her skin is getting paler." Jamal examined her, ordered tests, then stepped out into the hall and leaned against the wall. His face was tense. "What is it?" Aaliyah asked. "I suspect leukemia, but we need the labs and that costs money." Aaliyah looked through the window. Imani was playing with a doll missing an arm, murmuring words softly as if telling it secrets. Miss Thelma approached Aaliyah when Jamal left. "You're not from around here." "Pardon me? But your hands are clean, your nails are neat, your back is straight. Life here tends to hunch us over." Aaliyah didn't reply. "Don't worry. I had my secrets when I was young too. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying that when a woman is hiding something, she has to choose very carefully who she lets look at her, because some eyes are only looking for flesh and others are looking for a soul. Jamal is the second kind." Aaliyah nodded, a lump in her throat. 2 weeks passed. Aaliyah became a part of the place, not for what she knew, but for what she offered. Time, listening, commitment. She took care of cleaning, assisting, and carrying boxes. At night, she wrote in her notebook, one sentence repeated again and again. "I never had time for the poor until I became one of them." One morning, while organizing files in the small office, the phone rang. Jamal answered with a routine tone, but his face changed when he heard the name. "Sterling? Are you sure? And the file still exists?" Aaliyah dropped a box. He looked at her, didn't say anything but noticed her trembling. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just got a little dizzy." Jamal returned to the call, ending it in silence. He didn't explain anything. He just went out to the back patio for a cigarette. Aaliyah felt her heart pounding as if it wanted to escape her chest. Sterling. That name was a gunshot in her memory. The echo of everything she wanted to bury. Later she saw him sitting alone. She approached. "Can I ask what that call was about?" Jamal hesitated. "It's about a patient from the past. A case I thought was closed. They mentioned a name, one I haven't heard in years. Sterling." Aaliyah felt a chill. "Do you know him?" She lied as she had so many times to survive. Jamal didn't insist, but his eyes looked at her like someone starting to put the pieces of a puzzle together. Aaliyah didn't sleep that night. She sat on her mattress, the backpack open, the photograph in her hand, and the notebook full of phrases that weighed heavier and heavier. She was no longer Aaliyah, but Tasha Reed was also beginning to crack. In this game of names, lies, and hidden truths, she didn't know how much longer she could sustain the new life she was just beginning to build. There are wounds that scar, and then there are others that won't let you breathe. And the Sterling name was one of the latter. The question wasn't if Darius would find her. The question was whether, when he did, she would be strong enough to face him, or if she would fall back into the invisible prison she had fought so hard to escape. Aaliyah looked at herself in the cracked mirror of the shared bathroom as she washed her face. The water was murky and cold, and the dirty tiles reflected an image of herself she didn't fully recognize yet. Tasha Reed. That name had become a kind of armor. She wore it with increasing ease, though a part of her still trembled inside. Weeks passed slowly, but something within her began to change. The humble routine, the genuine human connection, the absence of pretenses. It all started to reshape her heart, the way fire molds metal. She no longer obsessed over Darius. She no longer replayed that hateful phrase like a dagger embedded in her memory. Now she focused on other things. Imani's laughter, the weariness in Jamal's eyes, Miss Thelma's insightful gaze, and an idea that was taking root within her to build something new from the ruins, not for herself, but for other women who had been used, manipulated, and silenced. Imani had become her center of gravity. The girl clung to her with absolute trust, as if she had been waiting for her all her life. They played with rag dolls, invented absurd stories, and shared silences that spoke volumes. Aaliyah didn't need to be a biological mother to feel that bond. Deep down, she knew this was the love life had previously denied her. "Have you felt invisible too?" Imani asked her one morning as they drew on the floor with colored chalk. "Yes, many times," Aaliyah replied without thinking. "Then we're the same," the girl said. "Because when people are scared they look away and then you don't exist anymore." Aaliyah felt a lump in her throat. She wondered how many times she herself had looked away, confined to her bubble of luxury and appearances, how many times she had pretended not to see the misery from her armored car. That guilt was a silent, constant companion. One hot afternoon, the neighborhood filled with music. A community fair was organized to raise funds. Jamal proposed it as a way for everyone to relax and have some fun, but it was Aaliyah who took charge. She convinced the neighborhood women to make sweets, crafts, and knitted clothes. She coordinated the spaces, the times, the permits. In just a few days she became a central figure. "I don't know who you were before, Tasha," Miss Thelma told her while they kneaded bread together. "But who you are now is good for this place." Aaliyah smiled. She had stopped correcting people when they called her by her new name. It was more than a disguise. It was a version of herself she wanted to become. In the midst of this small rebirth, an unexpected memory surfaced. Jamal was talking to a nurse about an old file. They mentioned something that turned Aaliyah's stomach. Monica Coleman. "She was my private patient," Jamal commented, unaware Aaliyah was listening behind a curtain. "I was fired years ago when I refused to cover up illegal prescriptions they were giving to addicted patients. Her son, that politician Darius, threatened to destroy my career if I spoke up." Aaliyah felt a pang. Her story and Jamal's had been connected long before they met. The same last name, the same corruption. The circle was closing without them knowing it, or perhaps fate was crueler than she imagined. That night, as the fair ended, Aaliyah climbed onto the roof of the building where she lived. She looked at the starry sky, and for the first time since she had fled, she allowed the tears to flow. It wasn't sadness. It was a bitter mix of gratitude and pain. She was alive. She was free. But there were still shadows she couldn't erase. Miles away, Darius Coleman threw his glass of scotch against his office wall. The crystal shattered without anyone daring to look up. His political campaign was collapsing. Some donors were abandoning him. The media was starting to catch on. Reporters were hot on the trail of the suspicious sale of the mansion. Aaliyah's disappearance had become a full-blown scandal. Find her, he ordered the private investigator he had hired. I don't care how. I need her back before this sinks me. The man, an ex-military type with a weary dog-like face, nodded emotionlessly. He already had some leads: bank movements, phone connections, blurry security camera images. It was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, Aaliyah visited an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the neighborhood. No one watched her. No one suspected she had secretly bought the place using a new identity. Her plan was clear. Transform it into a foundation for women who were victims of abuse. A real shelter with counselors, food, housing, and legal aid. A place where others like her could start over without having to lie about their names. She wrote everything down in a thick-leaved notebook. Needs, suppliers, funding ideas. Jamal helped her without asking too many questions. He no longer looked at her with suspicion, but with something closer to admiration, although an unmistakable melancholy still lingered in his eyes. I lost my wife to misdiagnosed pneumonia, he confessed to her one night. Private care killed her. Expensive hospitals make mistakes too. They just cover them up better. Aaliyah listened without speaking. She knew that, in a way, he too had been broken by a corrupt system. At the fair, Imani was selling handmade string bracelets. Her smile was brighter than any street lamp. She ran between the stalls with boundless energy. Miss Thelma watched her with tired but happy eyes. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until the unexpected happened. Imani suddenly collapsed. Her body trembled briefly before going still. A pool of blood emerged from her nose. The silence was immediate. Jamal ran to her, lifted her in his arms, and shouted for the crash cart. Aaliyah followed, barely feeling her legs. At the clinic, they connected and took samples and administered oxygen. The diagnosis landed like a bucket of ice water. The leukemia had progressed, and they didn't have the resources to treat her there. Aaliyah clenched her fists. There was no way she would stand by. Not now. Not with this girl who had given her back her soul. That night, while Imani slept with a fever, Aaliyah opened her backpack and checked her last resort. A single piece of jewelry she had hidden with extreme care, the only one she hadn't sold or left behind. It was her grandmother's ring with a sapphire that was worth more than the entire neighborhood. She clasped it in her fist and walked to the city. The next morning, she returned with a sealed envelope and a check sufficient to begin the treatment. No one asked where she got it. No one had the right. But Jamal looked at her with new eyes. They weren't eyes of suspicion. They were eyes of certainty. You didn't come here to hide, he told her. You came here to rebuild yourself. And you know what? You're doing it even if you're still breathing through lies. Aaliyah looked down for the first time. She wanted to tell him the truth. Tell him her real name, her story, everything. But she didn't. Not yet. Imani from her bed smiled at her with dry lips. Don't leave me. Never, Aaliyah replied, taking her hand. The clock kept ticking. Darius kept searching. But Aaliyah was no longer the woman who stayed silent when she heard she disgusted him. Now she was a woman who fought, even if fear still breathed behind every smile, because lies, when sustained for too long, begin to take on a life of their own, and hers were breathing. The question was how much longer she could keep them under control, because when a lie learns to breathe, it can also learn to kill. Aaliyah woke up before the sun, as she had almost every day since adopting the name Tasha Reed. The fan whirred with a constant noise, and the damp walls of the room seemed grayer than ever. She squeezed her eyelids shut before opening her eyes completely. She wanted to avoid for a moment the reality that weighed like a tombstone on her chest. Imani was still hospitalized, hooked up to medications that could barely control battling the relentless advance of her leukemia. Every minute was a test. Every smile she managed was a fortress against the despair that threatened to engulf them. Despite using the funds from the sale of her hidden jewel, Aaliyah knew it would never be enough. The treatment was projected to be long, brutal, and expensive, draining not just her finances but her spirit as well. At the clinic, Jamal observed her intently, studying her movements, her quiet moments, and how meticulously she avoided talking about herself. His feelings were evolving beyond mere admiration. He sensed something deeper, an unsettling intuition, like navigating a familiar map, but with all the landmarks renamed. He started to suspect that the story she presented was a carefully curated version, shortened, controlled, and smoothed over. Something told him there was much more beneath her sad composure. One morning, while checking the medicine supply in the makeshift pharmacy, Jamal casually mentioned, "Tasha, did you ever live abroad? You have an accent, a very subtle, refined one. It's not common around here." She paused, swallowed hard, and quickly thought of a plausible explanation. "I studied in Europe for a few years and then I worked in DC for a while. That's probably why I have that unusual tone." Jamal nodded without responding, but the skepticism in his eyes deepened. Later that day, Aaliyah went to the abandoned warehouse, the place where she had started to plan the foundation. Sitting on a broken box amid the dust, she opened her notebook and wrote a single sentence. "Fear is a cage with open doors." Closing the notebook, she took a deep breath. Just then she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Miss Thelma with a bag of bread and a sharp look on her face. "I went looking for you at the clinic. Imani was asking about you," she said directly. Aaliyah got up, brushing the dust from her hands. "I just came to jot down a few ideas. I need to get this place up and running before everything falls apart." Miss Thelma placed the bread on a nearby box. "You're not running from fraud or financial ruin. I knew that from the start. Not because of what you say, but because of what you leave unsaid. You don't run from love, child. You only run from fear. And who are you afraid of?" The question hung in the air like a thick cloud. Aaliyah wanted to answer, but she couldn't find the words to express everything she was feeling. She only managed to choke. "Myself." The older woman nodded, understanding perfectly. She left the bread, gently touched Aaliyah's shoulder, and left without a word. Meanwhile, back in Manhattan, Darius Coleman stared at his computer screen, trying to control his anger. On the screen was a photo taken by a volunteer at a charity event in South Shore. In the background, a group of women were gathered around a food stand. In the corner, slightly out of focus but unmistakably her, was Aaliyah. Darius's heart pounded in his chest. He jumped up, pushed his chair back and barked an order. "Get the car ready. We're going to South Shore." 3 hours later, his black SUV with tinted windows cruised through the dusty streets, looking completely out of place. People watched him with suspicion. Some moved out of the way, while others pretended not to notice. Aaliyah was returning from buying bandages for the clinic, walking quickly when she noticed the car parked in front of the entrance. She froze. Her stomach dropped and her chest tightened. She would recognize that car anywhere. Without thinking or analyzing, she turned and started walking in the opposite direction, not running, but moving with the distinct rhythm of someone trying to escape without appearing to do so. She ducked into an alley, then another, climbed a small hill, and hid behind a crumbling wall until the car started and drove away. He hadn't seen her. Darius hadn't found her, but he was close, too close. She couldn't sleep that night. Fear had returned, an old familiar illness. She wondered how much longer she could maintain this fragile existence before it all collapsed. At the clinic, Imani was waiting for her with shining eyes, holding out a bracelet made of red thread. "It's so you won't leave," she said. "Now you're tied to me." Aaliyah knelt down beside the bed and stroked Imani's forehead. I'm tied to you even if I don't wear it. Are you sad? A little. Why? You saved my life. Aaliyah fought back her tears. Because I don't know how to save my own. Listening from the doorway, Jamal felt something break inside him. He could no longer tolerate the uncertainty. This woman was unique, carrying scars that contradicted her invented story. That morning, while everyone was still asleep, Jamal went into the clinic's small office and turned on his laptop. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for until he found it. He typed the name that had been haunting him since he met Tasha Reed. Aaliyah Rhodes. The search results flooded the screen. Photos from social events, magazine covers, news reports of her disappearance, articles about a mysterious mansion sale, political scandals, and an image that stopped him cold. The same smile, the same eyes, the same face he had grown to know in recent months. Tasha Reed didn't exist. It was a disguise, a lie. But everything she had done was real, the help, the kindness, the devotion. This woman with a past full of broken pieces had saved lives. She had rebuilt her own, and now he knew who she truly was. Aaliyah Rhodes, the vanished wife of the man who had fired, humiliated, and destroyed him. The circle was closing. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He could no longer pretend not to know, and now he had to decide what to do with that truth, because knowing comes with the responsibility to act. And he wouldn't ignore it this time. Jamal woke up without having slept. The image of Aaliyah Rhodes on his screen was burned into his mind. Tasha Reed was a fabrication. He had seen her heal others while carrying her own unbearable pain in silence. He knew that confronting her would change everything. But silence was also a betrayal of what he valued most. The truth. He found her sitting on the clinic steps, her notebook in her hands. She wasn't writing, just holding it as if it were anchoring her. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. She looked up, her expression calm. Deep down, she already knew that he knew. "Yes," she said, slowly closing the notebook. "It's time." They went to the warehouse, the empty space that was slowly becoming filled with purpose. Jamal watched her, his expression carefully controlled, like someone about to drop a pebble in water, aware of the ripples it will cause. "Why did you lie?" Aaliyah leaned against the wall, her voice low but firm. "Because if I told the truth, they would hunt me down. He would find me. They would use me again. And I no longer had the strength to be a pretty object in a glass case." "Aaliyah Rhodes," Jamal murmured, as if the name tasted bitter. Wife of Darius Coleman, heir to one of the country's biggest fortunes, disappeared, turned into a national mystery and a broken woman. They didn't put that in the headlines. Jamal looked down. She walked towards him, looking him in the eyes. "I didn't lie to play games. I didn't do it to manipulate anyone. I just wanted a life that didn't hurt." "And did you find it?" Aaliyah smiled sadly. "Sometimes, when Amani laughs, when you talk to me without expecting anything, when I clean wounds without cameras around." He listened, feeling more than just words, more than just judgment. "You're not a coward," he finally said. "You were brave to leave, but now you have to be brave enough to come back." "Come back to what?" "To say your name out loud, to face them, to take back what's yours, because if you don't, they will, and they'll take it all away again, just like they always have." She looked at him for a long time, and something in her chest cracked. Meanwhile, in D.C., the media was exploding with news. An anonymous leak from the prosecutor's office revealed documents, audio recordings, and financial transactions linking Darius Coleman and his mother, Monica, to money laundering, misuse of public funds, and bribery of judges. Darius screamed furiously at his lawyers over the phone. Monica remained in her room, not out of shame but out of fear. That morning, an envelope with no return address had been delivered to her door. Inside was a copy of an altered birth certificate and a note that simply said, "The truth can't be erased." Monica understood instantly. The past she had buried in silence was returning to demand justice. In a desperate act, she did something she hadn't done in years. She called Jamal. He answered the call at the clinic. Her voice was almost unrecognizable. "Jamal, I need to talk to you, just you." Jamal hesitated but agreed. He met her at a secluded hotel, far from the cameras. Monica had aged noticeably in just a few weeks. She wore no jewelry or makeup, only dark circles, tremors, and a fear in her eyes. "I'm not here to justify myself," she said, avoiding his gaze. "I know what I did, but you need to know something. Darius is not my son." Jamal blinked in surprise. "What are you saying? My husband and I could never have children. I was attacked when I was 18. I hid it, pretending to be his legitimate mother. I raised that child as if I didn't remember how he came into the world." Jamal felt the air become heavy. "And you never told him?" "Never until now, because he is becoming that man, and I can't allow it." There was a long silence. Then Monica took out a small box filled with photographs, documents, and a sealed envelope. "Imani, that girl, what's her mother's name?" "She died giving birth. She's not listed in official records." "Look closely. That girl could be her granddaughter. There are coincidences, dates, details. The son of the man who assaulted her could now have a daughter, and that daughter was with them." Jamal left that place feeling like he was carrying a dead body. He didn't know how all the pieces fit together, but something told him the truth was closer than he realized. That night, Aaliyah was waiting for him at the warehouse. She had been cleaning and organizing to keep busy, but seeing his face, she knew he brought more than just bad news. "What happened?" He told her everything Monica had said about Darius, about the possibility with Imani. Aaliyah remained silent, then walked to the window and spoke without looking at him. "I have something to tell you too." Jamal swallowed hard. "That I'm sick. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. I was diagnosed a year ago. That's why I left too. I didn't want to die surrounded by people who would only cry about my inheritance." Jamal was speechless. "I have a few years left, maybe months if I'm lucky, but I want that time to mean something." "It will," he replied, his eyes filled with tears. "We're going to build that foundation. We're going to leave something that lasts even if you're not here." She hugged him for the first time without fear, as if touching him could ground her to the earth. Returning to her room, Aaliyah found an envelope with her name written in cursive. Opening it, she recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from her mother. "Aaliyah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I don't know how much damage I did to you. I only know there were years when I hated you because you were everything I could never be, because your father loved you more than me, because you shone effortlessly, and I was just a gray woman trapped in a marble house. Forgive me for being so harsh, for not protecting you, for not telling you that you deserved better than a husband who only wanted you for your name. I knew it from the start, but I stayed silent as always. This letter is not an excuse. It's a confession and a plea. Don't let my bitterness live in you. Be free. Be strong. And when you can't go on anymore, don't hide it. Allow yourself to be cared for, loved, supported, because even if you don't say it, you also deserve to be saved." Aaliyah burst into tears that shook her soul. The foundation wasn't complete yet. Darius was still hunting her, and the diagnosis was still with her. But that night, for the first time, she slept without fear. Because the truth hurts, but it also frees. And she no longer had room for lies. She just wanted to build something before her body failed her. And she would do it with Jamal, with Imani, with her truth as her only inheritance. The work on the old warehouse finished 2 weeks early. The entire neighborhood pitched in as if the project had always been theirs. Men who could barely read mixed cement with surgeon-like precision. Women who had carried years of pain painted walls like they were healing wounds. Every brick and every tile held a story. Stories that no one had ever wanted to hear until then. The Tasha Reed Foundation opened its doors in a ceremony without press, cameras, or empty speeches. Only those who mattered were there. Imani, her hair already thinning from chemotherapy, held the scissors to cut the ribbon. Jamal, with tears in his eyes, held Aaliyah's hand as she took a deep breath, as if each one was an act of defiance against death. Aaliyah had completed the legal paperwork weeks ago. All her remaining assets, accounts, investments, and shares had been transferred to the foundation's name. Not a single jewel, not a single property remained in her name. Everything that had once symbolized oppression would now be a tool for redemption. Aaliyah walked slowly through the corridors of the new building, with its white walls, murals painted by the neighborhood children, and empty consultation rooms waiting for patients. It all moved her deeply. This wasn't just a building. It was her legacy, her chance at redemption. Days later, Monica appeared in the shadows of a hallway corner. No one had seen her arrive. She was dressed simply without makeup or jewelry. Her eyes were swollen, and her body was stooped as if she had been dragging guilt. Imani was asleep when Monica entered her room. She sat by the bed and clumsily stroked the girl's hand. She murmured words that seemed directed more at herself than at the girl. Then she left silently, but Aaliyah was waiting for her outside. "I knew you would come," she said. Monica looked down. "I didn't come to justify myself. I came to ask for your forgiveness, not for Darius. He's made his choices. I came to ask forgiveness for being an accomplice, for staying silent." Aaliyah didn't speak for several seconds. "And you expect me to forgive you?" "No, just to listen." "Then speak." "I watched you fade for years. You became something so perfect it was impossible to see you. You were invisible, Aaliyah, just as I was my whole life. I was used, manipulated, forced to be silent too, and you were my mirror. That's why I hated you, because you reminded me of everything I didn't dare to do." Aaliyah stepped closer, not to hug her, but to look her in the eyes. "I hear you, but I don't forgive you for what you did to me. I forgive you for what you did to yourself." Monica let out the tears she had held back for decades. On television, Darius was news no longer as a politician but as a suspect. His image appeared alongside headlines of corruption, money laundering, and ties to influence peddling networks. He had been expelled from his party. His face no longer sold smiles, it sold scandal. Then, as a last resort, he appeared in front of the foundation. Aaliyah watched him from the second floor. She felt neither fear nor rage, but something colder, a sad compassion, like someone watching a person who was already lost. He waited for her in the courtyard, carrying a briefcase and looking older than his years. "I didn't come to fight," he said as soon as he saw her. "I came to make a deal." "There are no deals with you," she replied calmly. "I have proof, documents. I could sink you with a public lie. I could say you stole, that you faked your disappearance to take everything. I already did. I took everything but not the material things. I took back the dignity you lost years ago." She stepped closer, looking him in the eyes. "Do you really think this place is worth less than everything you had?" "No. I think this place is the only thing that's worth anything because you can keep all the material things. What you'll never have is peace. Tell your mother that I listened to her. And the girl doesn't need to know who her grandfather was. She already has enough love. She doesn't need yours." Before he could respond, Aaliyah reached into her purse and handed him an envelope. "If this is the last thing you ever have from me, Darius." Darius walked away without opening it. Later, in his empty apartment, he read it. "Power without love is hollow. Money without soul is death. You killed me many times when I was alive, but I resurrected, and you are still buried in your own ego. We are no longer enemies. We are nothing. Learn to be alone. Maybe then you'll start to find yourself." Jamal and Aaliyah shared a night together. It wasn't a night of passion but a night of truth. They slept in the same bed, listening to each other breathe, like two castaways clinging to each other in the middle of the ocean. "Are you scared?" he asked. "I have peace, which isn't the same as the absence of fear, but it's enough. I love you." She didn't respond with words. She took his hand and placed it on her chest. The next morning Jamal went to get coffee. When he returned, he found her asleep, smiling but not breathing. He walked over, touched her, and knew she was gone. He didn't scream or cry. He just sat beside her and held her hand until the sun fully rose. On the table were envelopes with handwritten names. One for Jamal, one for Imani, one for Miss Thelma, one for Monica. Jamal's note read, "Don't cry for what wasn't. Be thankful for what was. I leave the life I wanted for myself in your hands. Never let anyone doubt your light, because you made me shine even in the darkness. Imani's note read, "You taught me that a smile can heal more than medicine. Promise me you will write your story, because the world needs to know a little girl who defeated fear." The Tasha Reed Foundation continued to stand, grow, heal, and embrace. On one of its main walls, a mural of Aaliyah's smiling face reminded everyone that some women, though they may die, never truly leave, because what changes the world isn't money, it's the truth and the love that is built from it. Jamal didn't know how long he stayed by her side. Maybe an hour, maybe two. The world seemed to have stopped in that simple room where she, with her quiet body and lingering smile, had gone without dramatic goodbyes, without noise, without fear. She left as she had lived her last months, in silence, but leaving unforgettable traces. There was no funeral in a marble cemetery, no mass with chandeliers, no fake speeches from politicians. Her body was cremated as she requested, and her ashes were scattered in the garden of the Tasha Reed Foundation, right where they planted a young almond tree that Imani promised to water every morning. The news of her death spread quickly through the neighborhood. Women wept at the gate. Children fell silent, and Imani went days without speaking. Jamal operated on autopilot, but he didn't stop. Things had to continue, and he promised himself he wouldn't let her story be buried in that white room. It was Imani who made a new discovery. Weeks later, in one of Aaliyah's desk drawers, she found a carefully bound manuscript in the same clear, firm handwriting she used for clinic notes. The handwritten title read, "My husband said I disgusted him." The prologue began. This is not the story of a woman abandoned, but of a woman who learned to abandon herself to please the world and one day woke up. Jamal read it in a single night. When he finished, he knew what he had to do. Months later, the book was published by an independent publisher. No one anticipated the phenomenon it would become. It went viral, first on social media, then in traditional media. Women bought it in silence, shared it with tears in their eyes, whispered about it at neighborhood meetings, and analyzed it in universities. Aaliyah's story was not just about a betrayed wife. It was about every woman who had ever felt less than enough. In interviews, Jamal talked about the Foundation's project. He never took a penny for the book. All proceeds were dedicated to creating new Tasha Reed Foundation locations in other regions. The idea was clear. No woman should have to disappear to live again. Imani named the second location, the House of the Reborn. It was small, modest, but full of life. She herself painted a wall with the phrase Aaliyah had left her in her letter, "Promise me you will write your story." And she did. Imani wrote and published a children's book inspired by her experiences, where a little girl defeated the monster of gray days with a smile and a red bracelet. She was invited to book fairs. She gave interviews. She always spoke of Aaliyah as if she were still alive, and for her she was. Jamal continued as the Foundation's medical director. There were days when the weight of her absence felt like a stone. But all he had to do was step into the garden and see the women laughing, the children running, the volunteers arriving with enthusiasm to know that Aaliyah had won, that her love had not died, that her legacy was not ash but a root. He wore a locket around his neck, containing a lock of her hair along with a note she wrote him before she died. "When you doubt yourself, touch this. Here's the part of me that'll never leave." He never opened it in public, only on solitary nights when the silence just plain hurt. Monica changed too. Nobody believed it at first, not even Monica herself. But she did change. She began visiting shelters for vulnerable women. She became an anonymous volunteer at a center for abuse victims. And most unexpectedly, she donated every single one of her properties, stocks, and accounts to the Tasha Reed Foundation. She disappeared from the public eye entirely. No one ever heard from her again. Some folks say she went to a convent. Others claim she moved to another country. The truth is that her name ceased to be synonymous with power, and became a silent shadow that no longer sought to control anything or anyone. Darius, for his part, just sank. He lost absolutely everything. His fortune, his reputation, his allies. He even tried to publish a memoir to clear his name, but nobody bought it. He faded into oblivion, as men who built their empires solely on lies tend to do. Jamal saw him once at a city cafe all alone, disheveled and with this totally lost look. He didn't approach him. He didn't say a word. He just thought about what Aaliyah had written in that last letter. We are no longer enemies. We are nothing at all. A year after her death, the foundation organized a special ceremony in her name. People came from all sorts of places. Women who had read her book, women who had escaped violent homes, women who had been rescued from trafficking, women who had healed in silence thanks to her story. They spoke out loud without shame, without fear in their hearts. At the end of the event, one woman took the microphone and said, "I was invisible until I read her story. Aaliyah didn't die. She woke up in me and in so many others." Jamal closed his eyes and smiled softly. As he left, Imani gently took his hand. "Do you think she sees us from up there?" "I have no doubt whatsoever. She's in you, in me, in all of us. I dream about her sometimes." "What does she say?" "To keep writing. That words heal too." And Imani wrote on.